Do you desperately want to fix your marriage, but feel frustrated and powerless because your spouse isn't willing to do the work? You're trying to get your spouse to just listen and change, but the more you try to control your marriage, the more it just slips through your fingers. What if there was another way? I'm Josh Fuller, co-founder of Marriage Mavericks, and today we're going to talk about why trying to control your spouse is the worst way to fix your marriage and what you should do instead. Over the years, we've helped hundreds of clients heal their marriages even when they were fighting for years, felt totally disconnected, or were on the verge of divorce. The question of if one person can heal a marriage is something I hear every day. Many people wonder if they should give up if their partner isn't willing to work on things. People have told them it takes two people to heal a marriage. That's the traditional advice, right? But it's absolutely wrong. Just for context, out of the dozens of clients we've helped save their marriages in the past year, just two, I'll say that again, two started the work with their spouse. So in this video, I'm going to show you that one person can create positive change in a marriage, but not by controlling your spouse, by using something much more powerful that you already have. So in order to understand how it's possible to fix a marriage on your own, we first need to start with understanding why your spouse might not want to fix things right now, or to put it more accurately, why they might not be wanting to do the work to heal the marriage right now. And there can be a lot of reasons for this. Maybe they feel like in the past, they've put in all the effort and they've tried and you've ignored their calls for help, and now they're not willing to do anything until they see you make an effort. Maybe they're feeling hopeless or they don't see a path forward, and because of that, it just doesn't feel like it makes sense to them to do the work. Perhaps they feel like these are more your challenges. It's your temper. It's your lack of priority on the marriage. It's the ways that you've broken trust over and over and over again. It may be that whatever the problems are, they just don't see them as big of issues as you do, or they're not feeling the same pain. Maybe they don't feel the lack of intimacy in the same way that you do. Maybe they don't feel as lonely as you do right now. Maybe they don't see the disaster that's coming down the road. But whichever of those reasons it might be, what I want you to notice is none of those reasons means that your spouse hates you, means that they want to see you two separated and apart. And the truth is, they probably don't. And I am willing to bet that if you look at your marriage right now, if you can look at it objectively and set aside the hurt and the pain, which I know is so difficult, that you can see signs of hope. Maybe it's that they're spending time with you when they don't have to. Maybe they seem like they're wobbling, they're undecided, they can't make up their minds whether they want to go or stay. Maybe they're striking up conversations with you that they don't need to, or once in a while they'll still bring up the future. Maybe they're even telling you flat out that they would like to see the marriage work, but they don't believe that it's possible. There are all these little signs of hope that you can probably see if you look hard enough that will show you that your spouse, they don't hate you. And the truth is, there are reasons that they love you, that they fell in love with you, that they have stayed with you through all these years. And the problem isn't that they don't love you or that they wouldn't like this marriage to work. The problem is that they feel hopeless. They don't believe that things can be different. They don't believe that they can get what they want or they need from this marriage. And you may have given them a lot of evidence for that over the years. I want you to think about this for just a moment. Do you really believe that your spouse, if they thought that they could be happy and healthy here, that they could get their needs met? Do you think that they would rather run off, split up the home, spend tens of thousands of dollars on a divorce, tear down the life that they've built for the last 15, 20, 30 years, traumatize the kids, start over in the dating pool from scratch? Or do you think that they would rather have that here with their family, with you, with the life that they've built and the person that they've loved? It should seem pretty obvious that most sane people, that's what they would prefer. It would be ridiculous to want to rip everything down and start over just to get that love and affection. If you could get it here, the problem is they don't believe that they can. It's that they're feeling hopeless. What you need to do to make a change is you need to show your spouse that possibility for a better future. You need to give them hope that they can be happy and healthy and loved here. And the way that you do that, it isn't through control. In fact, control is totally ineffective. You need something much more powerful and something that you already have, even if your marriage is rocky. And that thing is influence. Now, we'll talk in a bit here about how you can utilize your influence inside of your marriage, but I want to start with talking about why that's so powerful. Let's use kids as an example. If you're watching this, there's a good chance that you have children. Got children myself. I've got a 21-year-old now, which is just insane to me, and a 4-year-old, which is also insane. And I want you to ask yourself, do you have control over your kids? Your first answer, your instinctual answer might be yes, of course I control my kids, but I want you to really stop and think about that for a minute. Can you control your kids? Can you make them do anything? I can tell you this, even my 4-year-old, short of physically picking her up and moving her, I cannot make her do anything. And the truth is, none of us have control over anybody in our lives, whether that's our children, it's our friends, it's our family members, it's our employees. We don't have control over anybody in our lives. What we do have is influence, right? We have the ability to wield that influence to create change. And when you look at your children, if you have children who are happy, functional, healthy humans who are out there, who are getting through the world, who are doing well, who aren't serial killers, how did you accomplish that? You didn't do that through control. You did that through influence. You did that by showing them better paths, by showing them the reasons to do things differently, by instructing them, by guiding them, by utilizing that influence. And the thing that you need to understand is that while we don't control anyone, we have an enormous amount of influence inside of our relationships. And this is especially true for our romantic relationships. When you have somebody that loves you, even if they're not in love with you, or somebody that loved you, when you have someone that you've shared years with, that maybe you share a home or finances or children with, you have a large amount of influence in that person's life. Your job is to use that influence to show them enough of a change, enough possibility to give them hope. So the question is, how can you use your influence to create change in your marriage? And to start, you need to recognize that there are a number of things in your marriage that you can change on your own that require no participation from your spouse whatsoever. Don't require your spouse to be working on them at all. And one of the best examples of this is arguing. Now, if you're watching this, and if arguing is a problem in your marriage, like it is for many people, you know how destructive arguments can be to everything, not just to the conversations in the moment and to not being able to resolve anything, but to the distance it creates between you two, to the walls that go up to the hurtful things that are said and the consequences of that. But let me ask you, is it possible to argue if one person refuses to argue? And the answer to that is no. It takes two people to argue. If you were to show up with the right tools and strategies and you were able to handle those conversations perfectly, you would be able to stop those arguments tomorrow, regardless of whether or not your spouse was trying to argue with you or not. I'm not saying that would be easy. Of course, it's one of those things that would be hard to do in practice, to control yourself, to use the tools in the moment, to show up the way that you need to. But if you did, you could stop those arguments dead in their tracks without your spouse doing anything at all. And there are a lot of other things in your marriage that operate in the same way, where you don't need your spouse's participation to make a positive change. You can shift yourself and the way you show up to the marriage. You can break patterns. You can regulate your emotions and your reactions no matter how your spouse is showing up. You can set boundaries. You can adjust your schedule. You can work to give your spouse the things that they want and need. You can show up as a better parent to your kids. You can be curious and caring and considerate in your conversations. You can be supportive. Let me ask you, if you were to change just those things and you were to show up caring and considerate and calm, you were able to communicate well, you were to do all those other things that we just talked about, and you were to do nothing but that for the next few months, how different do you think your marriage would be? And I want you to remember that those things we just talked about, those are things that lie entirely within your control. They don't require your spouse's participation at all. Now, of course, there are other areas in your marriage where you do need your spouse's participation to make them better. And this is especially true for things that go to not just getting the marriage to good, but to making the marriage great and thriving. So I'm going to give you 4 tips on how you can utilize your influence to lead change in your marriage in those spaces where you do need your spouse's participation. The first tip is that you need to make change attractive. You need to make it something that your spouse wants. And this starts in the way that you're talking about this change with your spouse. You need to make sure that you are talking about this change or this thing that you're asking for in a way where it's positive and not negative. So just as an example, if I want my spouse to go with me to couples coaching or counseling, being like, hey, I realize that I have some changes that I need to make, and I'd really like us to work together on this marriage so that we can be in a spot where we're both happy and healthy and you're getting your needs met and I'm getting mine as well. That's going to get a much better reaction than coming off the back of an argument and going, well, look, I don't think you're handling this correctly. I think that the way that you're talking about this stuff is wrong. I don't think that you should be asking for these things that you're asking for. And I think that we should go get a third party so that they can tell us which of us is right. You're going to get an entirely different reaction. You also want to talk about how this change benefits them. So let's say that I want to start to change the way that we communicate. And I realize that when we're having difficult conversations, things tend to explode. And I want us to get to a spot where we can put a pause in our conversations. Well, if I approach my spouse and say, hey, I realize that when we're talking, I find it a little challenging not to lose control over my emotions at times. And I really want to make sure that I'm able to listen through and hear what you have to say so that you can be getting the things that you want and you need, and we can really be getting these issues resolved. Another way that you can make change attractive is to combine things that you like or want with things that your spouse likes and wants. So let's say that you want to spend more time with your spouse. Well, if you want to spend more time with your spouse, they're probably going to be a lot more open to you asking to spend time with them doing something that they enjoy. So maybe they enjoy hiking or climbing or art. It doesn't really matter. But if instead of saying, hey, I want us to spend more time together, you can say, hey, I'd be interested in starting to go to that art class with you. Or I was wondering if I could start hiking with you on Saturdays. Is that something you would be interested in? You are making that change something that's attractive to them. Tip number 2, make things easy. One of the simplest ways you can encourage your spouse to make a change is just to make that change as easy for them as possible. So I'll give you an example from my own life. I'm in a spot right now where I'm really wanting to prioritize health and fitness. I want Cassie and I to be in a spot where we have many, many years together, happy and healthy and thriving. And I realize that exercise is an important piece of that. And one way that I can encourage and use my influence to help encourage Cassie to take time to exercise is by making that easy for her. So for me, what that means is whereas I would prefer to exercise in the mornings, I'm exercising in the afternoon so that I can make sure that she has a ride to the gym. You know, my daughter can come with us to our gym, but let's say that my daughter couldn't come with us to the gym. Well, then another way I could remove a barrier would be to get childcare. And so this is true for a number of things in your own life. Let's say you want to have more date nights with your spouse. Well, maybe, again, childcare, making sure childcare is lined up and removing that obstacle is something that would help. Or perhaps you can take care of a couple of chores that are going to have your spouse stressing out and feeling like she can't spend the time. Perhaps you could make sure that transportation is arranged, or maybe you could make the plans so that your spouse doesn't have to take on the burden and they can just relax and go on along for the ride. So you want to make change easy and remove as many obstacles as you can. Tip number 3 is to recognize the work that your spouse is doing and then to acknowledge them for that. Because here's the truth. It doesn't matter if you're doing 95% of the work to heal the marriage and your spouse is only doing 5%. There are still places that they are stepping up, that they are showing up. There's still good things that they are doing. There are still places that they are putting in effort and times that they are doing that. And if you do not acknowledge those things when they do happen, if all your spouse hears from you is how they're not making change and they're not stepping up and they're not creating steps, well, they're not going to have a lot of incentive to do good things, the things that you want them to do, to make any of the changes that you want them to make or have the new behaviors that you want them to have, if you don't see them and recognize them for it. So look actively for those places that your spouse is stepping up or showing up or doing good things or being a good person or responding to or making changes, and then acknowledge them for those things. Incentivize them, praise them. And this isn't about manipulating your spouse, folks, but we all want to be seen by our spouses for the effort we put in. We all want them to recognize the good things about us, the places that we try, the good people that we are. So do that. The 4th tip, and the most important one, is to lead by example. The surest way to get anything that you want in a marriage is to first give what you want to get. If you want to feel listened to in a marriage, listen to your spouse first. If you want to feel loved in a marriage, make your spouse feel loved first. If you want them to support you, support them first. If you want them to be committed to your marriage, be committed first. And if you want them to work on the marriage and to put in effort, do that first. One of the best definitions I've ever heard of leadership is that a leader is someone who inspires others to go willingly to a place that they would not go on their own. And this is how you create true, lasting change in a marriage. It's not by controlling your spouse, but it's by using your influence, it's by showing up as a leader, and it's by giving those things that you want to get in return. It is painful and it feels unfair and it hurts if you feel like your spouse doesn't care or isn't willing to put in the effort or isn't as committed as you are. But don't buy the myth that to fix a marriage, your spouse must be as committed as you or must be as willing to put in effort as you. In fact, that's never true. It is never true that both people are equally as committed and putting equal amount of effort into a marriage at the same time. It's just a matter of degree. One person can create massive change in a marriage. And there is a kernel of truth here. You are never going to get your marriage to a 10 out of 10 on your own. That does require both people. That's true. But you don't need to get the marriage to a 10 out of 10 on your own. Because right now, if you're in a spot where your spouse is so tapped out that they're not willing to work on this at all, your marriage is at a 1 or a 2. And what you can do on your own is get that marriage to a 5 or a 6, to a place that you have given your spouse enough hope and shown the possibility for a future to now they are willing to work with you to get that marriage to a 10. So if you're feeling like you're the more committed spouse right now, I want to ask you a critical question. Not whether you're willing to fix the marriage on your own, but if you're willing to start fixing the marriage on your own. If you're willing to put in the work and lead a change until you inspire your spouse to rise to your level and to work on the marriage with you to build something truly beautiful. And if the answer to that's yes, I want to invite you to book a call with my team to see if and how we can help.